I arrived early for my grandson's wedding carrying the century-old pocket watch my late wife wanted him to inherit. At the ballroom entrance, the receptionist checked her tablet and whispered, "Sir, your name isn't on the guest list." Then my son stepped forward. "You weren't invited. Leave before security removes you." I quietly walked away. 2 days later, he called. "Dad, we need you to approve the final $94,000 wedding payment." I smiled and hung up. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before I continue, leave me a comment. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs. Quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. The message about trust boundaries and accountability is what truly matters. I am 68 years old, and in 3 months I will learn exactly how little the word family meant to my son. But this October morning, I still believed someone would be happy to see me. I stood alone in the hotel room at the Asheville Grand, adjusting the navy blue vest in the mirror. Margaret had picked it out 8 years ago, the summer before the cancer took her. She'd held it up to my chest in the department store and said, "This one. When you wear this, you'll remember me." She was right about that. The vest fit the same as it did then, maybe a little snug around the middle. 68 years of living will do that to a man. I smoothed the fabric and felt the weight of the small wooden box in the inside pocket. My great-grandfather had made the pocket watch inside brass case white face hands that still kept perfect time 112 years later. Margaret had held that watch in her hands the week before she died. "Mom, Vernon," she'd said, her voice already thin. "When Zane gets married, you give him this. Let him know what kind of man the men in this family are." She never made it to this day. I picked up the box and opened it one more time. The watch gleamed in the October morning light streaming through the hotel window. I wound it carefully, 3 full turns, just enough, and listened to the mechanism catch and begin its steady tick. Then I closed the box and slipped it back into the vest pocket right over my heart. Downstairs in 15 minutes. The ceremony started at 12:30. I had time. I'd built Caldwell Transportation from nothing, one truck in 1985, when my son Brent was still in elementary school. 38 years later, we ran 52 trucks across 3 states, employed 47 people, and cleared enough revenue that my grandson could afford to get married at the Asheville Grand Hotel on a Saturday in peak wedding season. I'd signed the venue guarantee myself back in March. The deposit alone was more than most people's cars. Margaret would have loved to see this day. I took one last look in the mirror. White hair combed, navy vest pressed, brown leather shoes shined. The grandfather of the groom, ready to watch Zane marry a woman I'd never met, but trusted him to choose well. I locked the hotel room door and headed toward the lobby. The ballroom entrance was at the far end of the main hall, past the cascading white flower arrangements, and under the crystal chandeliers. I could hear music, already soft piano, the kind they play, while guests are still finding their seats. 12:15. 15 minutes before the ceremony. Perfect timing to slip in quietly and find a seat near the back. A young woman stood at a reception desk just outside the ballroom doors, hotel staff, maybe mid-20s, black uniform tablet in hand. She smiled as I approached. "Good afternoon, sir. Name, please." "Vernon Caldwell," I said. "Grandfather of the groom." She tapped the screen, scrolled, frowned slightly. Scrolled again. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see your name on the approved guest list." I felt the watch box press against my chest as I leaned forward. "That's strange. I'm Vernon Caldwell. I guaranteed the contract for this venue." Her smile tightened. "Let me just, one moment, please." She picked up a phone on the desk and turned away, speaking quietly into it. I couldn't hear the words. 30 seconds passed. A minute. She hung up and looked at me with something new in her eyes. Was it pity? Someone will be right out to speak with you, Mr. Caldwell. I stepped back from the desk. Two security guards in dark suits stood flanking the ballroom entrance, hands clasped in front of them, faces blank. They weren't looking at me yet, but they were there. What would Margaret say if she could see me now, standing in this lobby, about to give her grandson the watch she wanted him to have? The ballroom door opened. Brent stepped out. My son is 44 years old. I've known him every single one of those years. I know his walk, the set of his shoulders, the expression he wears when he's about to deliver bad news to an employee. He wore that expression now. "Dad," he said quietly. "Brent." I smiled. "I think there's been a mix-up with the guest list. Can you— Dad, you weren't invited." The sentence was spoken softly, but I heard every single word clearly. I stood there in the lobby under the chandelier light, in the vest Margaret chose with the watch she wanted me to give her great-grandson pressing against my heart, and I tried to make the words make sense. "I don't understand." "This is a private event," Brent said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, the voice he used with difficult clients. "We kept the guest list very controlled. I'm sorry you came all this way." The receptionist, her name tag read Claire Webb, looked down at her tablet like she wished she could disappear into it. "Brent," I said slowly, "I signed the venue contract. I'm Zane's grandfather. I know who you are." He glanced at the security guards. They straightened slightly. "But you're not on the guest list. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." A couple in formal attire passed through the lobby behind me. They slowed, watching. I could feel their eyes. "You're telling me I can't attend my own grandson's wedding?" It wasn't a question, but Brent answered it anyway. "That's correct." I looked into my son's eyes. In 44 years, I had never seen that look. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was the look of a man who had finished his calculations and was waiting to see if I would do anything. The watchbox felt like a stone in my pocket. "I see," I said. Brent nodded to the guards. One of them moved a step closer to me, not touching, not threatening, just present. A reminder that if I didn't leave on my own, I would be helped to leave. I turned and walked back across the lobby past the white flowers and the elegant guests and the polished marble floors. Behind me, I heard the ballroom door close with a soft, final click. I didn't know yet that being barred from the door was only the beginning. I did not walk away immediately. That was my first mistake, or perhaps my first piece of luck. I stood in the lobby for a moment, after Brent disappeared back inside, listening to the piano music drift through the closed ballroom doors. The security guard had stepped back to his position, no longer watching me. I was dismissed. Forgotten. A problem solved. Then a guest in a charcoal suit pushed through the ballroom entrance, adjusting his tie as he headed toward the restrooms. The door swung wide for 3 seconds before the hydraulic closer caught it. 3 seconds was enough. I saw the room. Rows and rows of chairs, white covers, navy blue sashes, flowers cascading down the center aisle. Chandeliers catching the October sunlight through floor-to-ceiling windows. A string quartet near the altar. And people. Everywhere. Every seat filled. I counted quickly the way you learn to count inventory in the trucking business. 20 rows. 11 chairs per row on each side of the aisle. 220 chairs minimum. Maybe more in the back sections I couldn't see. Brent had told me this was a small party, close family only, intimate. 220 chairs? My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. An email notification from the Asheville Grand Hotel payment system. The final payment authorization required. Amount $94,000. Approval deadline Monday, October 23rd, 5 p.m. Your authorization code is required to process this transaction. I looked at the screen. I looked at the closed ballroom door. I looked at Claire Webb, still standing at her reception desk, carefully not making eye contact with me. My money had paid for the deposit. My money had paid for the flowers, the chandeliers, the string quartet, the 220 white chair covers. My authorization code would pay for the final bill. But my name wasn't on the guest list. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked toward the exit. The hallway to the parking lot was empty except for a man crouched near the window, checking camera equipment spread out on a rolling case. Wedding photographer, judging by the black vest and the professional rig hanging from his shoulder. He looked up as I approached. "Excuse me," he said, standing. He was maybe 40, sandy hair, friendly face. "Are you Mr. Caldwell?" I stopped. "I am." His face brightened. "I thought so. I saw your picture on one of the family photos inside. They have a whole table with pictures of the couple growing up. I'm Marcus Henley, the photographer." He extended his hand. I shook it. "The groom mentioned you might not make it today. He said you haven't been feeling well. I'm glad you came anyway." The words hit me like cold water. "Zane said that, yeah, during the prep session this morning. He seemed worried about you." Marcus smiled. "But you look great. I hope you're feeling better." I stood there in the hallway holding the wooden watch box in my vest pocket and understood something new. Zane didn't know. My grandson, the boy I'd taught to check tire pressure when he was 12, the young man who'd called me every Sunday for years until the calls suddenly stopped. 6 months ago, he believed his grandfather was too sick to attend his wedding. They'd told him I was ill, and he'd believed them. How many of those 220 people had heard the same story? All of them, probably. The bride's family, the groom's friends, the extended relatives I'd never met. Everyone inside that ballroom thought I was home in bed, somewhere too unwell to travel. Nobody knew I'd been turned away at the door. "Mr. Caldwell." Marcus was looking at me with concern now. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded steady. "Take care of those photos. They'll matter more than anyone in there realizes right now." I walked out to the parking lot before he could ask what I meant. The rental car was where I'd left it that morning, 3rd row from the entrance. A silver sedan, nothing special. I'd driven up from Pine Haven at dawn because I wanted time to get ready properly, time to make sure I looked right when I gave Zane the watch. I sat in the driver's seat. I didn't start the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the hotel entrance. White marble columns, elegant awnings, the kind of place that costs more for a Saturday afternoon than most people spend on a month of groceries. Behind those walls, my son was walking his son down an aisle I'd paid for. My grandson was getting married surrounded by 220 people who'd been told a lie about why I wasn't there. And I was sitting in a rental car in the parking lot. I sat there for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock tick from 12:49 to 1 o'clock. Then I reached into the back seat and pulled out my laptop. I didn't open the hotel payment email, not yet. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing. October 21st, 2023, 12:15 p.m. Arrived at Asheville Grand Hotel for Zane's wedding. Name not on guest list despite signing venue guarantee contract. Brent appeared at 12:16 p.m. Exact words, "Dad, you weren't invited." Security guards present. Turned away from entrance. 12:20 p.m. Glimpsed ballroom interior through open door. Estimated 220 plus occupied chairs. Brent previously claimed small gathering, close family only. 12:47 p.m. Hotel payment notification received. Final authorization $94,000. Deadline Monday, 5 p.m. 12:52 p.m. Photographer Marcus Henley reported Zane was told grandfather hasn't been feeling well and might not make it. Zane believes grandfather is ill, not excluded. Photographer unaware of actual situation. I kept typing. Every detail I could remember. The look on Brent's face, the pity in Claire Webb's eyes, the soft click of the ballroom door closing. 38 years of running a company taught me one thing: when the numbers don't add up, someone is lying about the math. 220 chairs. $94,000. One grandfather barred from the door, and a grandson who thought I was too sick to come. The numbers didn't add up. I didn't know it yet, but that wedding day was only the final act of a plot that had been running for 12 months. When did it start? That was the question I needed to answer, sitting in that rental car laptop, open wedding music still drifting from the hotel behind me. I scrolled back through my email archive. October 2022. 12 months before the wedding. That's when I found it. The FaceTime call came in on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at the company office. Zane's name lit up my phone. I answered immediately. My grandson's face filled the screen, grinning. Behind him, a restaurant, soft lighting, white tablecloth. "Grandpa, I have news." Then the camera shifted. Brent sat directly beside him, not across the table. Beside Zane, shoulder to shoulder, both framed like they'd planned the shot. "Tell him," Brent said. Zane held up Paloma's hand, delicate fingers with a diamond ring catching the light. She leaned into frame, beautiful and shy. "We're engaged, Grandpa. We're getting married." I was genuinely happy. I told him congratulations. I told Paloma welcome to the family. I asked when, where, how he'd proposed. Brent answered half the questions. "We're thinking October next year," Brent said. "Asheville area, nothing too big." Grandpa, Zane said, "Don't worry about traveling. We'll figure something out so you don't have to." "Zane knows you can't travel far anymore," Brent interrupted gently. "We'll make sure you're comfortable whatever we decide." I frowned. "I can travel fine. I drove to Charlotte last month." "Dad, you know what the doctor said about long trips." Brent's voice was patient, kind. The voice you use with someone who's forgetting things. I hadn't been to any doctor, but Zane was nodding like he'd heard this before. The call lasted 10 minutes. Brent ended it. "That is getting tired," he told Zane, still on camera. "Let him talk to you later." That was the last time I spoke directly to my grandson for 12 months. Every text I sent to Zane's number after that got answered by Brent. Every call went to voicemail. The one time I drove to his apartment in February, nobody answered, but I got a text from Brent's phone an hour later saying Zane was out of town. Sitting in the rental car, typing it all into the laptop, I saw it clearly. Brent had positioned himself between us, physically in that restaurant, digitally controlling every message. He'd planted the seed that I couldn't travel, couldn't handle things, needed managing. 12 months before the wedding, the isolation had already started. I scrolled forward. December 2022. The land sale. I'd owned a 12-acre plot east of Pine Haven since 1991. After Margaret died, I kept it mostly out of sentiment. Then a developer made an offer too good to ignore. Howard Ramsey, the real estate transaction attorney, spread the documents across the long wooden table in his Pine Haven office. The closing took 40 minutes. The check was deposited electronically, $1,247,000. Brent met me in the parking lot afterward. "That's good money, Dad," he said. December wind cut through my jacket. "Let me help manage it. The wedding's coming, hotel deposit is $45,000, catering's another $38. And we need those warehouse repairs about $180. The rest we can hold for contingency." It made sense. Brent handled company finances anyway. I trusted him. I signed the authorization that night at home and emailed it back. Then I read it more carefully. This authorization grants Brent Caldwell full authority to manage the funds from the sale of property located at 1847 Meadowbrook Road for purposes related to events and company operations. I highlighted that phrase. Events and company operations. That was broader than what we'd discussed. This phrasing could cover almost anything. I sat at my desk for a long time, cursor blinking on the highlighted text. Then I decided to trust my son. $1,247,000. 38 years of building. I'd handed it over in 10 minutes, and I'd highlighted the line that should have stopped me, then ignored it. I kept scrolling. February 2023, 8 months before the wedding. This part was harder to document because I didn't know it was happening. Celeste, Brent's wife, 41, always pleasant at family dinners, had started visiting my house more often, bringing groceries, helping with paperwork, being thoughtful, I thought. She was filming me. I forgot my keys on the kitchen table one morning because I was thinking about a shipping contract. I left my reading glasses in the living room after the newspaper. I asked Brent about the weekly operations meeting on Monday, then asked again Wednesday because I wanted to be certain of the time. Normal things. Things anyone does when they're busy, when they want to double-check important information. Celeste recorded all of it. Then she edited the footage. I didn't see the video. Until much later, my friend who used to work as a detective showed it to me after he'd gotten a copy of the guardianship petition filed with the North Carolina court. She'd cut the clips together, manipulated the audio sequence, removed context. 10 seconds of me looking for keys, 5 seconds asking about the meeting, 8 seconds searching for glasses, all spliced into a 2-minute video that made me look like a man who couldn't remember anything within minutes. My friend watched it, then looked at me. "Vernon," he said quietly, "this isn't a forgetful person. This is a person filmed to look like a forgetful person. Those are two completely different things. Legally." The video was dated February 2023. Celeste made it 8 months before the wedding. I sat in the rental car looking at the laptop screen. 3 moments displayed in my notes: October, December, February, 12 months of preparation. My son didn't wake up on the wedding day and decide to bar me from the door. He spent a year building the cage. I just didn't know yet how he planned to lock it. Because while I was remembering those 3 moments, there was a fourth I hadn't discovered yet. The meeting happening right now on the 4th floor while the wedding played out 1 floor below. I looked up from the laptop screen, and that was when I saw it on 4th floor, 2nd window from the left, room 412, the lights still on. The rest of the Asheville Grand Hotel was dim in the early afternoon sun, window shades drawn to keep the heat out. The wedding would be concentrated on the 1st floor ballroom reception hall, maybe the garden terrace. But that 4th floor window glowed bright fluorescent light, visible even from the parking lot. I knew that room. I'd been in it 3 years ago for a logistics conference. VIP conference room. Long table, 12 leather chairs, full AV setup, whiteboards on the walls. The kind of space you rented when you needed privacy for business. I watched the window for 30 seconds. Silhouettes moved behind the glass, multiple people standing, sitting, gesturing. A meeting. On the 1st floor, 220 guests were watching my grandson get married. On the 4th floor, my son was conducting a private business meeting. 38 years of running a transportation company is like driving the same route 10,000 times. You notice when something is out of place, even when you can't see it directly. And what I was seeing didn't make sense. Why would Brent need a VIP conference room during his son's wedding reception? I picked up my phone and called the oldest friend I had. Clarence Donovan answered on the 2nd ring. "Huh, Vernon," he said. His voice was warm, unhurried. 71 years old, retired from the Asheville Police Department Detective Division 6 years ago, and he still sounded like he was ready to work a case. "How's the wedding? I need to talk to you." The warmth shifted. I heard him move a door, closing, background noise cutting off. He'd gone somewhere private. "Tell me," he said. I told him. All of it. Arriving at the hotel at 12:15, Claire Webb at the reception desk searching for my name. Brent stepping out of the ballroom. The exact words, "Dad, you weren't invited." The security guards. The glimpse through the door, 220 chairs. The photographer's innocent comment about my health. The payment notification for $94,000. And room 412 on the fourth floor, lights on, people moving. Clarence was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Your name is on the venue contract?" he asked. "Yes. Your signature is required for the final payment." "Yes. 94,000. Due Monday at 5. Do you have any written record of what happened today, Fictional?" "Not yet. I just started documenting it on my laptop." "Good." His voice had changed. This was the detective who'd worked fraud cases for 23 years. "Here's what you do. Start recording everything. Time, location, exact words people said, witnesses. Email it to yourself for a timestamp that matters legally. Don't delete anything. Don't approve that payment yet." I grabbed a pen from the console. "Go ahead. Who was the receptionist?" "Claire Webb, name tag." "Who saw Brent turn you away?" "2 security guards. A couple in formal clothes passing through the lobby." "Marcus Henley, the photographer." Did Brent say anything else besides 'you weren't invited'?" I closed my eyes, replaying it. "He said it was a private event, that they kept the guest list very controlled, that he was sorry I came all this way, but he knew you were coming. He had to. I signed the venue guarantee in March. I'm on every hotel document as the financial responsible party." Clarence was quiet again. I could hear him thinking. "Sure, Niauxa," he said slowly. "I need you to think carefully about something. Is this just about the wedding, or is this about something bigger?" I looked up at room 412. The light was still bright. The silhouettes were still moving. "It's bigger," I said. "How much bigger? I don't know yet. But Brent spent 12 months isolating me from Zane. He convinced my grandson I was too sick to travel. He got me to sign over funds from the land sale with authorization language broader than what we discussed. And his wife, Celeste, she was filming me in February, making me look incompetent. I saw the edited video later. It ended up in a guardianship petition filed with the court." The line went silent. "Guardianship," Clarence said finally. "North Carolina?" "Yes." "When was it filed?" "I don't know. My friend who showed me the video got it from the court records. He used to work as a detective, too." "Frank, you met him at Margaret's funeral." I remember Frank. Clarence's voice was tight now. "Vernon, guardianship petitions don't just happen. They're legal proceedings to declare someone incapable of managing their own affairs. If it was filed and you weren't notified, that's a problem. If it was granted, that's a bigger problem. I wasn't notified. Then it probably hasn't been served yet. Or it's pending." He paused. "What assets are we talking about?" "Caldwell Transportation, 52 trucks, 47 employees. Last year's revenue was about $18 million. Clarence exhaled slowly. "And you still control the company?" "As far as I know. Brent's the CEO. I'm the founder and majority owner. As far as you know isn't good enough. You need to check. Monday morning, first thing, call your attorney. Call your accountant. Verify your access to every account, every document, every signature authority you have." I was writing all of it down on the laptop. My hands were steady. "What am I looking for?" I asked. "Anything you should have access to that you don't. Anything that requires your signature that suddenly doesn't. Anything that was in your name that isn't anymore." "You think he's trying to take the company?" "I think," Clarence said carefully, "that you were barred from a wedding you financed in a building where your son is holding a private business meeting 4 floors above the reception one day, before a $94,000 payment is due that you still control. And I think 12 months of preparation went into getting you to this exact moment." I looked up at room 412. The light was still on. "Vernon," Clarence said quietly. "Is this just about the wedding, Or is this about something bigger? I knew the answer. I'd known it the moment I saw that window. It's about the company, I said. 38 years. He's in that room right now doing something I can't see yet. Then we need to figure out what leverage you still have, Clarence said, and what he thinks he's already taken. The wedding music drifted faintly across the parking lot. Up on the fourth floor, the silhouettes kept moving, and I sat in the rental car with my laptop open, finally understanding that I'd been in a fight I didn't know was happening. But now I knew, and I still had $94,000 he needed. The phone rang at 8:47 Monday morning, and I knew before looking at the screen that it would be my son. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Pine Haven, laptop open to the document I'd been updating since Saturday. 23 pages now. Every detail time-stamped, witnesses noted, exact words recorded. Brent's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it ring twice before answering. He said. His voice was warm, casual. How are you feeling? 2 days ago, he'd ordered security guards to remove me from his son's wedding. Now he was asking about my health. I'm fine, I said. Good. I wanted to check on you after Saturday. I know that was difficult. Difficult. That was the word he chose. What do you need, Brent? He paused, then shifted gears. The hotel sent the final invoice, $94,000. I need you to approve it today. I'll email you the authorization form, just sign and send it back. I took a sip of cold coffee. Tell me which part of that $94,000 came from the land sale money, I said. Silence, 4 seconds. Dad, this isn't the time to discuss financial details. The hotel needs. Then it's not the time to approve $94,000 either. I hung up. My hand didn't shake. I opened the laptop and added a new entry. Monday, 8:47 a.m. Brent called requesting approval for hotel final payment $94,000. Asked which portion came from land sale funds. 4-second silence before deflection. Declined to approve. Call ended 8:51 a.m. I took a screenshot of the call log, saved the document, and emailed it to myself. Evidence 1, payment refusal. Timestamp 8:52 a.m. That was when I knew I was no longer the man who got barred from a door and walked away confused. I was the man who built an $18 million company. And I remembered how to fight. Tuesday morning, I drove to Judith Whitfield's law office on Main Street. Judith was 64, sharp as broken glass, and she'd been handling corporate legal work for Caldwell Transportation since 2015. She'd also been Margaret's estate attorney. I trusted her. Her office smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. She poured me a cup and sat down across from me at the long wooden table. "What, you said you needed to see the operating agreement," she said. "The certified copy, original signatures?" She pulled a plastic binder from the file cabinet. Inside was the document we'd signed in 2018 when we'd restructured the company, Brent as CEO, me as founder and majority owner. Judith opened to a page marked with a yellow tab. "Section 8.4, she said. "I had a feeling you'd want this one." She turned the binder so I could read it. Section 8.4, sale or transfer of substantially all assets. The sale, transfer, or disposition of substantially all assets of the company shall require the written consent of all founding members, including Vernon J. Caldwell. No officer, including the chief executive officer, shall have unilateral authority to execute such transactions without obtaining the requisite written approval. I read it twice. "Brent signed this," I said. "He did." Judith pointed to the signature page. Brent's name in blue ink, dated March 14th, 2018. He was present for every negotiation. He knows exactly what this clause means. So if he tried to sell the company, as CEO, he can run daily operations, sign shipping contracts, hire employees, approve expenses, but he cannot sell, transfer, or dispose of substantially all company assets. Not without your written consent. And if he signed something anyway, Judith looked at me steadily, then whatever he signed would be legally void. He doesn't have the authority. The transaction would be unenforceable. I thought about room 412, the bright window on the 4th floor, the silhouettes moving while the wedding played out below. My son had been in that room signing something. I was sure of it. And what if he told the other party he had the authority? I asked. Then he would be misrepresenting his position. That's fraud. If he signed a memorandum of understanding claiming CEO authority to sell the company, and the buyer relied on that, he'd be personally liable when the deal fell apart. She paused. And it would fall apart, because you'd refuse to sign. Without your signature, there's no sale. I looked down at section 8.4. The words were clear, simple, absolute. Brent had spent 12 months isolating me from Zane. He'd convinced my grandson I was too sick to attend his wedding. He'd gotten control of over $1 million. His wife had filmed me, edited footage, submitted it to a guardianship petition. All that preparation, all that planning. And he'd forgotten or ignored the clause he'd signed 8 years ago. Does he know? I asked. Does Brent know about this section? He signed the agreement. He was in the room when we negotiated it. Your attorney specifically requested this protection for succession planning. Brent pushed back initially, but eventually agreed. She closed the binder. Vernon, if your son signed a deal to sell Caldwell Transportation without your consent, his entire agreement is standing on a faulty signature. When the buyer finds out, they'll walk away. I finished. For the first time in 4 days, I smiled. Not a smile of happiness, a smile of clarity. My son had spent 12 months building a trap, but he'd forgotten to check if the cage door actually locked. Judith watched me carefully. What do you want to do? She asked. I need to prove I'm mentally competent to exercise this authority, I said. If there's a guardianship petition pending, they'll argue I can't make legal decisions. I need clinical documentation that I can. Judith nodded. Independent evaluation. Not through your family doctor, someone Brent can't influence. I can recommend a neurologist at Asheville Memorial. Do it, I said. I stood up. She walked me to the door. Vernon, she said quietly, your son signed that MOU as CEO, but a CEO doesn't have sufficient authority for this transaction. His entire deal is standing on a faulty signature. I looked at her. I know, I said, and now I understand the battlefield. Understanding the legal battlefield was only the first step. I needed to prove I was competent enough to hold it. Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. I drove to Asheville Memorial Neurology Clinic. I'd scheduled the appointment myself, bypassing my family doctor. Brent had access to my regular medical records. He'd been listed as emergency contact since Margaret died. But he didn't know about this appointment. Dr. Patricia Sheffield met me in a bright examination room. She was maybe 55, gray hair, pulled back reading glasses on a chain. She reviewed my intake form with the methodical precision of someone who had administered thousands of cognitive assessments. Mr. Caldwell, she said, I understand you're requesting an independent cognitive evaluation. Can you tell me why? Someone has suggested I have memory issues, I said. I need documentation that I don't. She nodded, asking no further questions. The tests took 90 minutes. Montreal Cognitive Assessment, first shapes to remember, draw a clock, repeat numbers, backward name animals. Then the mini mental state examination. More questions, more memory tasks. Spell world backward. Countdown from 100 by sevens. I'd run a transportation company for 38 years. I could count backward in my sleep. When we finished, Dr. Sheffield reviewed my scores. Mr. Caldwell. She said, your cognitive function is excellent for any age, let alone 68. You scored 30 out of 30 on both assessments. Perfect scores. Whoever suggested you might have memory issues is either mistaken or severely misinformed. I felt something loosen in my chest. I need that in writing, I said. Signed and stamped with your seal, please. She printed 2 copies, signed, both pressed her official seal into the paper, and handed me the originals in a sealed envelope. I placed the report in my vest pocket right next to the watch box that never got given at the wedding. The vest now carried both the past and the proof. 30 out of 30. I drove home calculating my son had an edited video. I had a signed neurological report from a doctor with no connection to our family. We'd see which carried more weight in front of a judge. 3 weeks after the wedding on a Friday night, Clarence called me at 10:30. "Vernon," he said quietly, "I'm going to sit outside your house tonight. Just a feeling. Don't turn on any lights if you hear me out there. You think he's coming? I think he needs to know what you have." I went to bed with my phone on the nightstand. Ringer off, vibrate on. The text came at 2:19 a.m. "He's here, headlights off, entering now, stay in bedroom." I lay in the dark, listening. Footsteps downstairs. Soft, careful. My office door opening. The creak of the 3rd drawer. 38 minutes. At 2:55, the footsteps retreated. The front door closed with a soft click. Through my window, I watched a dark sedan pull away no lights until it reached the end of the street. My phone buzzed. "You got photos. License plate timestamp enough to ID the vehicle." He took documents, carried them out in a paper bag. I texted back, "Coming down." Clarence was waiting on the porch when I opened the door. He showed me his phone, clear photos of Brent's car, the license plate visible timestamp, showing 2:17 a.m. "Vernon," he said, "he didn't break in because he needs documents. He broke in because he needs to know what you have." We went inside. I turned on the office light. The 3rd drawer was open slightly. I pulled it all the way out. The transportation contracts were out of order. Insurance files moved. Some documents were missing, old shipping manifests, employee records from 5 years ago, nothing critical. Brent had been searching. 2:17 a.m., Clarence had said. The timestamp mattered legally, premeditation, not impulse. My son planned this midnight search the same way he'd planned the wedding exclusion. Nothing was accidental. I reached to the back of the drawer, feeling for the small release catch hidden in the wood grain. It clicked. The false back panel slid aside. Inside the secret compartment built 30 years ago, known only to me and Margaret, sat a manila folder. Margaret's original trust documents. The ones she'd signed 3 months before she died, creating the irrevocable trust that protected half our assets. Specifically naming me as sole trustee with Zane as beneficiary, bypassing Brent entirely. Untouched, undiscovered. Brent had spent 38 minutes searching my office. He'd found old contracts, employee files, insurance papers. He'd taken what he thought might matter, but he hadn't found the secret compartment. He didn't know it existed. I looked at Clarence. "He came looking for leverage," I said. "And he found some," Clarence agreed. "Old documents he can use to build some narrative, but he didn't find what really matters." I slid the trust documents back into the compartment, clicked the false panel shut, closed the drawer. "He'll be back," Clarence said. "Maybe." I looked at the closed drawer. But now we know he's desperate enough to break into his father's house at 2 a.m. That tells me something. What? That whatever deal he signed in room 412 at the wedding, the one that's legally void without my signature, has a deadline, and he's running out of time. Clarence nodded slowly. "The photos are time-stamped and geotagged," he said. "Breaking and entering. Even with a key, it's unlawful entry when you're taking documents without permission. This is evidence." "Add it to the file," I said. I walked him to the door. The sky was starting to lighten, almost 3:30. In a few hours, it would be Saturday morning. 3 weeks since the wedding. 3 weeks of building a case my son didn't know existed. I had a neurological report proving perfect cognitive function. I had photographs of a 2 a.m. break-in. I had Section 8.4 giving me veto power over any sale. And I had Margaret's trust documents hidden where Brent would never find them. My son was searching for my weaknesses, but he didn't know I was counting his mistakes. Sometimes your enemy hands you the evidence you need. They just don't realize it until the notification arrives in your inbox. Monday morning, 3 weeks after the wedding, I was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing the evidence file when an email arrived from Asheville Regional Health System. Subject: Medical Records Access Notification. Account Security Alert. I opened it. Dear Mr. Caldwell, this is an automated notification that your medical records were accessed on October 22, 2023, by an authorized representative using credentials associated with Brent R. Caldwell. This access was performed under medical power of attorney authorization on file. If you did not authorize this access, please contact our compliance department immediately. October 22nd, 3 weeks ago, the day after the wedding. I sat staring at the screen. Brent had used my medical power of attorney, the one I'd signed in 2018 when I had knee surgery meant for emergencies, only if I was incapacitated. There was no emergency. There was no medical reason for him to access my records. He'd used it to get information. Probably looking for something to support the incompetence narrative Celeste was building. I forwarded the email to Judith with a single line. HIPAA criminal violation. Unauthorized access under false pretense. 42 U.S.C. Section 1320D-6 for your files. Then I called the hospital compliance department. The woman who answered listened to my explanation, pulled up my account, and confirmed yes, the access had occurred. Yes, it was logged under the 2018 power of attorney. No, there had been no medical emergency or treatment requiring the access. I'm revoking all medical authorizations immediately, I said. Effective today. Only I have access to my records. I'll process that right now, Mr. Caldwell, and I'm flagging this access for our compliance review. Unauthorized use of medical power of attorney is a serious matter. I hung up and called Judith. T. Vernon, she said. After I explained a criminal HIPAA violation, if they use this medical information to file a guardianship petition, this crosses into elder fraud. That's a Class E felony in North Carolina. Minimum 15 months in prison. He gave me the evidence himself, I said. He did. The hospital's automated system documented everything. Time, date, credentials used, purpose stated. Digital trail. 38 years running a company taught me this. The digital trail never forgets, and automated systems don't lie to protect family. That hospital notification was cleaner than any testimony I could give. 2 days later, Wednesday afternoon, Celeste called. Tucker. She said, her voice warm, concerned. Brent and I were thinking maybe a care assessment would help us understand how to support you better. There's a wonderful specialist who does in-home evaluations. Very gentle, very professional. Would you be open to that? I already knew who she was talking about. Clarence had called me the night before. His detective network still ran deep in Asheville. My Susan Fletcher, he'd said. 45 presents herself as a care coordinator, but she's actually a capacity evaluator. Works with guardianship law firms. She'll come to your house, ask you questions, write a report that gets submitted to the court. They're setting up their evidence chain. Should I refuse? I'd asked. No. Let her come. You'll pass any legitimate assessment, and when her report says you're competent, it'll be their own expert contradicting their narrative. So when Celeste asked, I said yes. Susan Fletcher arrived at my door Thursday morning in a professional navy coat, small clipboard, in hand smile, practiced and kind. Mr. Caldwell, she said, extending her hand. I'm Susan Fletcher. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me today. I let her in. We sat in my living room. She started with soft questions. How was I feeling? Any trouble with daily activities? How was I managing the house since Margaret passed? I answered clearly, precisely. No hesitation, no confusion. Then she moved to memory tests. What year is it? Who's the president? Can you remember these 3 words? Apple table penny. I'll ask you again in a few minutes. I remembered all 3. She asked about my daily routine. I described it: wake at 6, coffee review company reports. Lunch at noon, walk in the afternoon, dinner at 6:30. Same routine I'd kept for 40 years. And you're still involved with the transportation company? She asked. I founded it in 1985. 52 trucks now. My son Brent is CEO, but I review the operations reports weekly. Revenue maintenance schedules, client contracts. That's impressive, she said, making notes. Do you remember any specific details from the recent reports? Thought last week's revenue was $2.1 million. We added 2 new trucks to the Charlotte route. Had to replace transmission on truck 17. That's the 2019 Freightliner, needed maintenance at 83,000 miles. She stopped writing and looked at me. Then I asked my own questions. What assessment tool are you using? I said. She blinked. I'm sorry. Your evaluation. Is this based on the mini mental state examination, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment? Or is this a functional capacity assessment? It's a comprehensive home evaluation, she said. And how does this differ from a clinical neurological exam? I had one of those 2 weeks ago. Perfect scores. Her smile tightened. Who requested this evaluation? I asked. And for what legal purpose? Your family was concerned. Which family member specifically? And will your report be submitted to a court? She looked down at her clipboard. Mr. Caldwell, I'm just here to help assess your needs. Then assess this: I'm 68 years old. I run a transportation company. I remember my daily schedule, my company's financial performance, and the maintenance history of 52 trucks. I also remember that capacity evaluations are typically requested in guardianship proceedings. Is that what this is for? She stood up. I think I have what I need, she said. She left 10 minutes later. Clarence called me that evening. Her report went to the law firm this afternoon, he said. My contact saw it. Subject demonstrates clear cognitive function and sound judgment. No evidence of incapacity. I smiled. Their own evaluator. I'm Vernon, Clarence said quietly. If that report doesn't help them, they won't stop. They'll find another way. We need to end this before they can change their strategy. The smile faded. He was right. This wasn't about winning individual battles. It was about ending the war before my son could reload. I looked at my laptop. 6 pieces of evidence documented. Neurological report. Break-in photos. HIPAA violation. Section 8.4. Margaret's hidden trust documents. Now a capacity evaluation that backfired. The question was, how many more did I need before I could finish this? The answer's in the money. Clarence said like he could read my thoughts. Follow the money trail. That's where you'll find what you need to end it. I pulled up my banking access. The company accounts Brent managed. It was time to see where that land sale money really went. The answer to how many more pieces of evidence I needed was hiding in the numbers. It always is. 6 weeks after the wedding, on a Saturday night, Clarence came over with his laptop. We sat at my desk, the same desk Brent had searched at 2 in the morning 3 weeks earlier, and logged into the company banking system. I still had full access. Brent managed the day-to-day accounts, but I was the primary owner. Every transaction was visible to me. Clarence pulled up the statements from December 2022. There it was. The land sale deposit. $1,247,000. December 19th, 2022. Then the outflows started. Wedding expenses. Hotel deposit $45,000. Catering $38,000. Flowers, photographer, venue fees. I added them up. $175,000 total for the actual wedding. Brent had told me the wedding would cost over $280,000, but that wasn't the number that stopped us. Clarence pointed at the screen. "Say $820,000, he said quietly. Wire transfer, January 8th, 2023. Delaware intermediary account. Description acquisition agreement deposit." I stared at the line. January 8th, 9 months before the wedding. 9 months before I was barred from the door. He collateralized the company, I said. 9 months before the wedding. This was never about Zane's ceremony. Clarence scrolled through more statements. February, March, April. Small payments to the same Delaware account. Legal fees. Due diligence costs. Structuring fees. My son had been selling Caldwell Transportation since January. The wedding in October was just theater. A convenient moment to isolate me publicly, while the real deal moved forward privately. $820,000. I'd built this company over 38 years. 1 truck in 1985. 52 trucks now. 47 employees. $18 million in annual revenue. My son used 8 months to collateralize it. We sat in silence for 3 minutes. Neither of us had words for that number. A week later, on a Thursday evening, Brent called. "Dad," he said, voice warm, conciliatory. "Celeste and I were thinking maybe we could have a family dinner. Clear the air. I know things have been tense since the wedding. Tense." That was the word he chose for barring me from my grandson's ceremony. "That sounds nice," I said, playing along, letting him think I was softening. "Great. How about next Tuesday we'll come to you? Bring dinner. Just the 3 of us, Zane's still on his honeymoon." "Tuesday works." "Perfect. Dad, I'm glad we're doing this." He went quiet. I heard a sound, the phone being set down, but not the click of disconnection. He hadn't hung up properly. I sat very still. Celeste's voice distant but clear. Did he sound suspicious? No. Brent's voice. "He's slowing down. Exactly like you said he would." I reached for my laptop, opened the recording app, hit record, and held the phone to the speaker. "Udika, the signing is December 15th, Brent said. "After Zane gets back, we file the guardianship petition. By January, he'll be at Sunrise Care, and he won't be able to touch anything." Sunrise Care. I know that place. I visited a friend there last year. A tiny room. A window looking out at a parking lot. 24-hour supervision. No control over your own money, your own decisions, your own life. I sat motionless holding that phone. Margaret's vest still hangs in my bedroom closet. I am not going into Sunrise Care. "What if Judith finds out?" Celeste asked. "Judith doesn't know about the MOU, Brent said. "Nobody does except the Texas people. And they're not talking until after the signing." The line finally clicked dead. I sat in my kitchen laptop, recording still running, and played back what I'd captured. Clear audio. Both voices identifiable. December 15th, signing date. Guardianship petition timeline. Sunrise Care Facility named. I emailed the file to myself. Subject Evidence 7. Overheard call. Timestamp 8:47 p.m. 2 days later, Saturday afternoon, Brent and Celeste came over. I'd spent those 2 days thinking about what to do. I could confront them with the recording. I could show them I knew about the MOU, about the guardianship plan, about Sunrise Care. Or I could let them think they were winning. When they arrived, I made a choice. I played the character they'd created. Ilata Brent. I said, standing in the living room doorway, Good to see you. Didn't you say the hotel was paid? Or was that the caterer? I can't remember what you told me. His eyes flickered to Celeste. The hotel's paid, Dad. We talked about that last month. Last month? I frowned like I was trying to recall. Was that when Zane got back? No, wait, he's still on his trip, isn't he? When did you say he was coming home? December, Celeste said gently. We told you Tuesday, remember? Tuesday, I nodded slowly. Right, Tuesday. I watched Brent's face, the relief in his eyes, the quick glance at his wife that said, see. I told you he's declining. They stayed for an hour. I asked the same questions twice. I forgot details they'd mentioned minutes earlier. I acted exactly like the edited video Celeste had made back in February. When they left, Brent squeezed my shoulder. We'll take care of you, Dad, he said. Don't worry about anything. I closed the door behind them, walked to my desk, opened the laptop, added a new entry to the evidence file. Saturday, November 25th, 2023, 3:15 to 4:20 p.m. Brent and Celeste visit. I performed strategic forgetfulness, repeated questions, confusion about timeline memory gaps, matching Celeste's edited video from February. Brent's visible relief confirms he believes I'm declining cognitively. This performance is documented evidence of my full awareness and tactical control. I chose to appear confused. I am not confused. Performance successful. I read those two words on my screen. Then I looked at the timestamp as I emailed it to myself, 5:34 p.m. 38 years of running a company taught me that timing is more important than speed. My son thinks I'm slowing down. In reality, I'm just waiting for the right moment. 8 pieces of evidence now. The neurological report, the break-in photos, the HIPAA violation, Section 8.4, Margaret's trust documents, the capacity evaluation, the bank statements showing the $820,000 wire transfer. And now the recorded call plus documented proof I was performing, not declining. December 15th was 3 weeks away. My son thought he was watching me fade. He didn't know I was documenting every move he made and every move I pretended to forget. But documentation was only half the battle. I needed to move the assets where he couldn't touch them, even if the guardianship somehow went through. Documentation builds a case. But protection requires moving the assets where they cannot be touched, even if the worst happens. Thursday morning, November 23rd, 2023. I sat in Judith's law office. Just the two of us. Early before her secretary arrived. The new documents were spread across her wooden table. Caldwell Family Irrevocable Trust. I'd spent the weekend thinking about this. An irrevocable trust meant exactly what it said. Once I signed, I couldn't undo it. The assets would belong to the trust permanently. Vernon Caldwell would be the trustee, the manager, but not the owner. Zane would be the beneficiary, and Brent would be neither. Judith walked me through the document page by page. Legal language, but clear enough. Warehouse A, 4.2 acres on the east side of Pinehaven, where we stored the trucks overnight. Transferred to the trust. The garage, 12,000 square feet, where we did all our maintenance work. Transferred to the trust. 52 semi-trucks. Freightliners, Kenworths, 2 Volvos. Every vehicle in the Caldwell transportation fleet. Transferred to the trust. This is airtight under North Carolina trust law, Judith said. The company Caldwell Transportation, LLC, can continue operating. Brent remains CEO. But the physical assets no longer belong to the LLC. They belong to the trust. And the trust cannot be sold, transferred, or dissolved without the trustee's consent. Mine, I said. Yours. If Brent tries to sell those assets as part of the company, he's selling something the company no longer owns. The buyer would get an empty corporate shell. I thought about the $820,000 wired to Delaware in January. The acquisition agreement deposit. The deal Brent had been building for 9 months. He thought he was selling Caldwell Transportation 52 trucks, warehouse, garage contracts, everything. What he was actually selling was a corporate entity that no longer owned any of those things. "Where does the original go?" I asked. "My office safe. The copy is yours." I picked up the pen. I'd signed thousands of documents in 38 years. Contracts, invoices, insurance forms, employment papers. This one felt different. Heavier. I signed my name. Judith witnessed it, stamped it with her notary seal. The original went into her safe. The copy, she placed it in a sealed envelope and handed it to me. "Give Vernon," she said quietly. "This protects Zane's inheritance. No matter what happens with the guardianship, no matter what Brent tries to do, these assets are locked. Your grandson will inherit them when the time comes. Warehouse A, the garage, 52 trucks. I'd built them piece by piece over 38 years. Now they belonged to the right person even when I was no longer here. That was what mattered. Not revenge. Legacy." I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat. When I got there, I went straight to my office, opened the third drawer, pressed the hidden release catch, and slid the false panel aside. Margaret's trust documents were still there untouched since Brent's 2 a.m. search. I placed the new trust document beside them. 2 trusts now. Margaret's protecting half our personal assets. Mine protecting the company Zane would inherit. I closed the compartment, locked the drawer, and emailed Judith. "Document secure. Thank you." Timestamp 11:34 a.m. 9 days later, on a Saturday night in early December, Clarence came over at 9 p.m. "Time to organize," he said. We sat at my kitchen table, light shining down, laptop, printer, 8 plastic folders arranged in a row. Clarence had brought a legal pad with numbered items. We worked methodically, few words spoken, just the hum of the printer and the sound of papers sliding into folders. Folder 1. Hotel security camera footage from the wedding. Marcus Henley had given me a copy when I'd explained what happened. Timestamp showing me at the reception desk at 12:14 p.m. Claire Webb searching the guest list. Brent appearing at 12:16. The guards. Folder 2, audio recording of the overheard phone call. Brent's voice. The signing is December 15th. By January, he'll be at Sunrise Care. Folder 3, bank statements showing the $820,000 wire transfer to Delaware. January 8th, 2023. Acquisition agreement deposit. Folder 4, email timestamps. Every piece of evidence I'd sent to myself, creating a permanent record with dates and times. Folder 5. Dr. Sheffield's neurological evaluation. 30 out of 30 on both assessments. Signed, sealed, official. Folder 6. Susan Fletcher's capacity evaluation report. Clear cognitive function and sound judgment. No evidence of incapacity. Folder 7, Asheville Regional Health System notification. Unauthorized medical records access. HIPAA violation. Folder 8, photographs from the 2 a.m. break-in. License plate timestamp geotagged. We worked until 1 in the morning. Clarence lined up the 8 folders perfectly aligned and looked at me. "Vernon," he said, "you have enough. The remaining question is, how do you want to end this?" I thought of Zane, of his bride Paloma, who I'd never met, of the name Sunrise Care, that tiny room, that parking lot view, of Margaret's navy vest still hanging in my bedroom closet. If Margaret were still here, what would she say? I think I know the answer. She would say, "Vernon, loving someone doesn't mean letting them escape the consequences they created themselves. I want it to end at the right time," I said. "No sooner, no later." Clarence nodded slowly. "Timing is everything, not evidence. You've got the evidence. Now you need the moment." December 15th, I said. That's his deadline. The signing date. 11 days, Clarence said, checking his watch. It was 1:03 a.m. Sunday morning now. 11 days, I agreed. We sat in silence for a moment. 8 folders on the table. Trust documents in the secret compartment upstairs. Section 8.4 in Judith's files. Everything in place. Almost everything. There's one more thing, I said. Something Brent tried to hide. Something he thinks I'll never find. Clarence looked at me. What? I don't know yet, I said. But I know it's there. 38 years of running a company taught me people who plan this carefully always leave one piece of evidence they think is hidden but isn't. The thing they kept just in case. The note they wrote to themselves. The proof they needed to remember their own plan. Where do you think it is? I thought about Brent's office at the company. The place where he'd worked for 20 years. Where he'd planned this acquisition deal. Where he'd made that wire transfer. His office, I said. Something he forgot to destroy. Or something he thinks doesn't matter. Clarence stood up. Then we find it before December 15th. I looked at the 8 folders. At the clock, showing 1:03 a.m. At my friend who'd sat with me through this whole nightmare. Would 11 days, I said again. And somewhere in Brent's office I knew was the final piece I needed. Sometimes the evidence you need is sitting in your enemy's drawer. They just forgot to destroy it. Tuesday morning, December 5th, 2023. I drove to Caldwell Transportation at 9:30. Brent had an external meeting with a supplier in Charlotte. Clarence had confirmed it the night before. He'd be gone until at least 2 p.m. I parked in my usual spot. The building looked the same as it had for 20 years. Red brick, white trim, the sign I'd installed in 2003 when we expanded Caldwell Transportation. Serving the Carolinas since 1985. I walked in through the front entrance. The receptionist, Linda, who'd worked here for 12 years, looked up and smiled. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. "Good to see you. Just need to grab some old insurance documents from the CEO office," I said. "Brent said I could stop by while he's out." She nodded, returning to her computer. I walked down the familiar hallway. My footsteps sounded loud on the tile floor. Past the break room, past the operations manager's office to the corner office at the end. The CEO office. Brent's territory now. But I'd built this building. I knew every drawer, every filing system, every corner where papers got forgotten. I closed the door behind me and stood there for a moment, looking at the desk. Brent kept it organized. Computer monitor, leather desk pad, pen holder, framed photo of Celeste. 3 filing cabinets against the wall. Bookshelf with binders labeled by year. I started with the desk drawers. Top right, office supplies, sticky notes, a stapler. Top left, personnel files, old performance reviews. Bottom left, financial records, tax documents, quarterly reports. Bottom right, business cards. Old company letterhead, promotional materials. We hadn't used in 5 years. I was about to close it when I saw the corner of a document beneath the stack of letterhead. I lifted the paper carefully. A printed copy of the Caldwell Transportation Operating Agreement. Not the original that was in Judith's safe. A photocopy, ring binder holes punched in the margin. But this copy had annotations, red pen marks throughout. Sections underlined, notes in the margins. I turned to section 8.4. The unanimous consent clause, the one that required my written approval for any sale of substantially all company assets, was crossed out. Heavy red lines through the entire paragraph. In the margin, handwritten in blue ink. Remove Vernon retired, not active member. Initials at the bottom, JRM. Not Judith's initials. A different lawyer. And a date, March 17th, 2023. March. 6 months before the wedding. 7 months before Brent barred me from the door. I stood there holding the paper, reading that margin note again. Vernon retired, not active member. What does retired mean when you still own the company? When your name is still on the building? When you review the operations reports every week? When you just signed a trust protecting the physical assets? My son wrote that word like it was a fact. It was a wish. I pulled out my phone and took photographs. Multiple angles ensuring every word was legible. The crossed-out section. the handwritten note, the initials, the date. Then I placed the document back exactly where I'd found it. Under the letterhead corner, visible the same way it had been, I straightened the stack of business cards on top, making sure everything looked untouched. I checked the desk one more time. Nothing else annotated, nothing else marked. This was the only copy. Brent had consulted a different lawyer, JRM, whoever that was, about removing my consent rights. Probably shopping for an attorney who would tell him what he wanted to hear. Judith had written Section 8.4 to protect me. So Brent found someone else to help him eliminate it. But you can't just delete a clause from a legal agreement. The original was notarized, filed, binding. This annotated copy was what a wish list, a plan, evidence of intent, evidence of fraud. I stood there in the quiet office looking at the closed drawer. Not active member. 4 words. Handwritten in blue pen. This wasn't about money or business strategy. This was about erasing me while I was still breathing, making me invisible on paper before putting me in Sunrise care, declaring me retired so my rights could be ignored. My consent could be bypassed. My signature could be deemed unnecessary. I thought about the trust I'd signed with Judith. The warehouse, the garage, the 52 trucks all protected, now transferred beyond Brent's reach. My son had planned to sell those assets as part of the company. But the company no longer owned them. And even if it did, Section 8.4 still existed. The original agreement signed and notarized required my consent. This annotated draft didn't change that legal reality, but it proved something else. It proved Brent knew he needed my consent. Knew Section 8.4 existed. Knew it blocked his deal. And instead of asking me, instead of involving me, instead of treating me like the founder and owner I was, he tried to find a legal theory to declare me not active, so he could proceed without me. March 17, 2023, 6 months before the wedding, where he barred me from the door. He didn't wake up one morning and decide to destroy me. He built the plan brick by brick, month by month. Lawyer consultation, edited video, medical records access, guardianship preparation, and he forgot to burn the blueprint. I walked out of the office, closing the door softly behind me. Linda looked up as I passed reception. "Find what you needed?" she asked. "I did," I said. "Thank you." I drove home, hands steady on the wheel, and parked in my driveway. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the photographs on my phone. Section 8.4 crossed out in red pen. The handwritten note, "Remove, Vernon retired, not active member," dated March 2023. I forwarded the photos to myself. Subject Evidence 9. Annotated Operating Agreement Draft. Timestamp 11:47 a.m. Then I sat back in the chair. 9 pieces of evidence now. Trust documents protecting the assets. Section 8.4 protecting my legal rights. And proof that Brent had tried to eliminate both. But finding evidence of his fraud was different from facing what it would cost. Not what it would cost me. What it would cost Zane. My grandson was on his honeymoon right now. Somewhere warm, probably. Happy with his new wife. Starting his life. And when he came home, he'd learned that his father was under criminal investigation. That his grandfather, the man he'd been told was too sick to attend the wedding, had built a case that would destroy his family. I looked at the photo one more time. Vernon retired, not active member. My son had written those words, and now I had to decide what they would cost him. The hardest part about catching your son destroying everything you built isn't the betrayal. It's knowing his innocent child will watch him fall. I sat in my truck outside Zane's apartment at dawn, engine idling, frost on the windshield. 6:15 a.m. I'd been doing this for 3 weeks. Watching. Making sure he was okay. Making sure he was living his life unaware that in 7 days his father would face criminal charges. The door opened. Zane stepped out in his work jacket, lunch bag in hand. 19 years old. Manufacturing job. Normal life. Good kid. He didn't see me parked 50 yards away. I watched him drive off, then went home. Back in my office, I added a ninth folder to the 8 Clarence, and I had organized the annotated operating agreement proof. Brent knew exactly what he was trying to erase. Then I spread the evidence files across my desk. 9 folders. Financial transfers. Forged medical records. The annotated operating agreement section 8.4 crossed out. Vernon retired, not active member. The edited video. Witness statements. Hype AA violations. Break-in photos. Bank statements. And on the shelf, a framed photo of Zane at age 7 holding a fish we'd caught at Lake James. I picked up the photo. He'd asked me that day, "Grandpa, why do people lie?" Some kid at school had lied about something. I'd given him some answer about people being scared or wanting things they couldn't have. Now, 12 years later, he was about to learn the answer in a way I'd never imagined. Prosecuting Brent would protect 47 employees, 18 million in company assets. It would stop my son from selling what he didn't own, from putting me in Sunrise Care, from erasing me while I was still breathing. But it would destroy Zane's relationship with his father during the years when he needed it most. I sat there holding that photo, calculating costs I couldn't measure. I could stop this. Walk away. Let Brent have the company. Then I remembered standing in that hotel lobby, the navy vest, the watch box, Brent's voice. "Dad, you weren't invited." My son had chosen greed over family. Not in a moment of weakness, in a plan that ran for months. Lawyer consultations, edited videos, medical record theft. A wedding used as cover. I put the photo back and picked up my phone. I called Judith. "It's time," I said. "Let's meet. Noon. Coffee shop in Hendersonville." Judith sat across from me, Clarence beside her. The place smelled like burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights overhead. A young father at the next table with his toddler. Normal people living normal lives. "December 15th, Judith said. "Brent has an appointment at my office. 2 p.m. He thinks he's finalizing trust transfers and operating agreement amendments." "What actually happens?" I asked. "First, Brent signs the fraudulent documents under oath. That creates the legal basis: signed fraud, witnessed, time-stamped. Then you enter with Clarence as witness. I present the complete evidence file, all 9 folders, photographs from his office, bank statements, HIPAA violation, everything. And then, law enforcement is contacted immediately. With his signature still wet on fraudulent documents, the evidence is irrefutable. Emergency board meeting follows to reverse unauthorized actions." Clarence leaned forward. "Vernon Brent told the employees you're stepping back due to health concerns. Promised them year-end bonuses from what he called freed-up capital." "The trust funds," I said. "The trust funds," Clarence confirmed. At the next table, the toddler dropped a sippy cup. It rolled toward our booth. I reached down, picked it up, handed it back. "Thank you," the father said. I nodded, turned back to Judith. That father would go home to a normal family. Dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. I would go home to evidence folders and an affidavit that would end my son's freedom. Before I tell you what Judith laid out at that coffee shop meeting, are you still with me? Comment A if you think Vernon should tell Zane everything, or B if he should keep the plan secret. Add one short reason. A quick note: what follows includes fictionalized details added for emotional impact. Judith slid a document across the table. "This makes you the official complainant. Required for the DA to proceed with criminal charges." I looked at the paper. Legal language. My name at the bottom, blank line for signature. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled slightly. I thought about Zane. About his face when he learned the truth. About Paloma. About the family Christmas that would never happen. I signed. Judith witnessed it, dated it, placed it in her folder. 7 days, she said. December 15th, 2 p.m. 7 days. I repeated. Clarence walked me to my truck. The December sun was already low, the air cold. "No, you okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "But it's the right thing." He nodded. "It is." I drove home alone, hands on the wheel, radio off. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Caller ID Zane. I stared at the screen. This could be the last normal conversation with my grandson. After December 15th, everything would change, I answered. Grandpa, Zane's voice. "Hey, Zane. I know things have been weird since the wedding, but can we talk? I found something in Dad's office that doesn't make sense." I sat there, phone to my ear, grandson waiting. 7 days until December 15th, and Zane had found something. "What did you find?" I asked. "I don't want to talk about it on the phone," he said. "Can I come over tomorrow?" I looked at the house, at the evidence files waiting inside, at the signed affidavit in Judith's office, at the trap set for 7 days from now. "Tomorrow," I said. "Come over tomorrow." I told my grandson the truth. Not all of it. Just enough to keep him safe from what was coming. The next evening, December 9th, I met Zane at a diner 15 miles outside Pine Haven. Neutral ground. A place where neither of us would run into anyone we knew. He was already in a booth when I arrived, coffee in front of him, looking tired. "Hey, Grandpa," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "Hey, Zane." We ordered him a burger, me just coffee, and sat there for a moment, in the kind of silence that happens when both people know the conversation is going to be hard. "So," he said finally, "I found something in Dad's office last week. A duplicate invoice. It showed, I don't know how to describe it. It showed trust funds being moved into operating accounts. A lot of money. $820,000. I kept my face neutral. "Okay, Grandpa." "Why would Dad move $820,000 without telling anyone, without telling you?" I looked at my grandson across the table. 19 years old. Good kid. Honest. The kind of person who finds a duplicate invoice and immediately knows something's wrong. I could tell him the truth. I could show him the 9 evidence folders. I could explain that his father had been planning to sell the company since March, that he'd tried to have me declared incompetent, that he'd forged medical documents and violated federal law. Or I could protect him. "Zane," I said slowly, "your father is protecting the company. Sometimes that means making financial decisions that look strange from the outside. It's accounting reorganization, all legal, just complicated." He frowned. "But I know it looks odd," I said, "but I'm aware of it. It's fine." Relief washed over his face. He'd been carrying this worry, and I just told him he didn't need to. Then the relief faded to confusion. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "if everything's fine with the company, why wasn't I allowed to invite you to my wedding? What did I do wrong?" That question hit harder than anything about the money. "You didn't do anything wrong, Zane," I said. "Not a single thing." "Then why? Some things between your father and me have nothing to do with you. That's all I can say right now." He looked down at his coffee. "I wanted you there." I know," I said, "and I wanted to be there. You ever lie to someone you love to protect them? That's the moment you understand your enemy. Because that's exactly what Brent had done, lied to protect his plan, lied to keep Zane in the dark. And now I was doing the same thing. The difference, I told myself, was that my lie protected Zane. Brent's lies protected himself. I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. 2 days later, December 11th, Brent called. "Dad," he said, voice soft, almost apologetic. "I know things have been rough between us. I was thinking, maybe we could have dinner, just you and me. Clear the air." I knew exactly what this was. A test. Checking if I suspected anything. Checking if I was still the confused old man he needed me to be. "That sounds nice," I said. "Really great. How about Friday night I'll come to you?" Your Friday works. I paused, then added the line I knew he needed to hear. You know, maybe you're right about the company, Brent. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Maybe it's time I stepped back more. Silence on the other end. 4 seconds. He was checking, listening, measuring whether I meant it. We'll talk about it at dinner, he said finally. I'll see you Friday. After he hung up, I opened my laptop and typed. December 11th, 7:43 p.m. Brent called proposing dinner to clear the air. I agreed and delivered performance line, not as sharp as I used to be. 4-second pause before response indicates he's evaluating authenticity. Performance excellent. Brent believes I'm cooperating. Dinner Friday maintained consistency through December 15th. I emailed it to myself. Timestamp 7:47 p.m. 4 more days. The night of December 14th, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed looking at the ceiling, not anxious exactly. Just aware. In 9 hours, everything would change. I got up at midnight, went to my closet, and looked at the navy vest hanging there. Margaret had chosen it 8 years ago. I'd worn it to the wedding, or tried to. Tomorrow, I'd wear it again. Not for a wedding this time, for an ending. The vest hung there like a judge's robe waiting for court to convene. I went to my desk and opened the laptop. Pulled up the evidence files one more time. 9 folders. Every piece of proof I'd gathered over the past 3 months. Financial transfers, medical records, operating agreement, video footage, witness statements, HIPAA violations, break-in photos, bank statements, affidavit, everything I needed to prove my son had tried to destroy me. I closed the files and opened my email. To Judith Whitfield, subject tomorrow, message ready. I hit send. 11:58 p.m. Her reply came 2 minutes later. Everything in place. Get some rest, Vernon. I closed the laptop. Walked back to the bedroom. Looked at the vest one more time. Margaret, if you were here, would you tell me I'm doing the right thing, or would you tell me to forgive him? I think I know the answer. You'd tell me that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from consequences they created themselves. You'd tell me that 38 years of building something matters. You'd tell me that Zane deserves to inherit a company, not a disaster. You'd tell me to do exactly what I'm about to do. I got back into bed, looked at the clock, 1:07 a.m. In 9 hours, I would walk into Judith's office. Brent would already be there, confident, ready to sign documents that would finalize his takeover. And I would walk in with Clarence as my witness, with 9 folders of evidence. And I would show my son exactly what happens when you underestimate the man who built everything you're trying to steal. The trap was set. The evidence was compiled. The witnesses were ready. The only question left was whether I could actually pull the trigger on my own child. I turned off the light. Margaret, tomorrow. December 15th, 2 p.m. Father and son would meet in Judith's office for the last time as family. After that, we'd just be plaintiff and defendant. My son called me cooperative at 9 that morning. By 2:30, he understood what I'd been cooperating with. I woke at 6:15 without an alarm. Didn't need one. I'd slept maybe 4 hours total, but my mind was clear-focused. I showered, shaved, made coffee. Put on the navy vest Margaret had chosen 8 years ago. The same vest I'd worn to the wedding, or tried to. This time I'd wear it all the way through. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. Clarence. He's at the office, Clarence said. Very confident. I walked past his window. He's on the phone, smiling, reviewing papers. The MOU, I said. Probably. You good? I'm good. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table with the newspaper I wasn't reading and the coffee I wasn't drinking. 5 hours until 2 p.m. Across town, Brent was confident. Celeste probably making lunch plans for after the signing. The deal that had been running since January, $820,000 deposited in Delaware, months of negotiations, a wedding used as cover, all of it coming together this afternoon. At least that's what he thought. What he didn't know I'd sent certified copies of the Caldwell family irrevocable trust documents to the Texas buyer's legal team last night. Overnight delivery. Signature required. Catherine Morrison, their attorney, had received them at 7:30 this morning, and she'd read every page. I picked up my keys at 1:30 and drove to the Asheville Grand Hotel, Conference Room B, the same hotel where I'd been barred from my grandson's wedding 2 months ago. Different floor, different purpose, but the same building. I arrived at 1:45, 15 minutes early. Judith met me in the lobby. "They're already here," she said quietly. Texas team arrived at 1:30. Brent and Celeste got here at 1:40. They're in the conference room reviewing documents. And they don't know I'm coming. They don't know you're coming. Clarence joined us carrying a leather folder. The evidence files were inside 9 folders, organized, indexed, ready. "You sure about this?" he asked. I looked at him. "You ever been more sure of anything?" He smiled slightly. "No, I guess I haven't." At 2 p.m. exactly, I walked into Conference Room B. The room went silent. Brent sat at the conference table, Celeste beside him. Across from them sat 3 people I'd never met: Dale Hutchinson, maybe 55, Texas buyer representative in a gray suit; Catherine Morrison, the sharp-eyed attorney with reading glasses on a chain; and another man, probably financial advisor. I walked to the end of the table and sat down. "Dad," Brent said slowly, "what are you doing here?" I looked at him. At my son. 44 years old. CEO of the company I'd built. The man who'd spent 8 months planning to steal it. Sitting at my table, I said. Catherine Morrison cleared her throat. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, looking at me, not Brent. "We received some interesting documents this morning. Certified trust documents. Dated November 28th, 2023. Brent's face went pale. "What documents?" Catherine slid a folder across the table. "Caldwell Family Irrevocable Trust. Executed by Vernon Caldwell as grantor and trustee. The trust holds title to warehouse of 4.2 acres, the maintenance garage 12,000 square feet, and all 52 semi-trucks currently operated by Caldwell Transportation, LLC." She looked at Brent. "The assets you've been negotiating to sell as part of this acquisition, they're not owned by the LLC anymore. They're owned by an irrevocable trust, which means you don't have the authority to sell them." Brent stared at her. "That's not I'm the CEO. I have full authority. Not for this transaction," Catherine said. She pulled out another document. "Your company's operating agreement section 8.4 requires unanimous written consent of all founding members for the sale of substantially all company assets. You signed this agreement in 2018. She pointed to Brent's signature at the bottom. "Here's Mr. Caldwell," she said. And I realized she was still talking to me, not Brent. "Did you provide written consent for this sale?" "No," I said. "I did not." Dale Hutchinson stood up. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at Brent. "We can't proceed with this transaction. The assets listed in the MOU aren't yours to sell." Celeste's hand found Brent's under the table. I watched her fingers close around his. The last time she'd touch him as a wealthy man's wife. Brent's voice came out tight, strained. "We can restructure the deal, Mr. Caldwell," Catherine said, and this time she was talking to Brent. "We've spent 6 months on due diligence. Our client invested significant resources based on representations you made about your authority to execute this transaction. If those representations were inaccurate," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Dale gathered his papers. Catherine closed her laptop. The MOU Brent had spent 6 months negotiating became scrap paper in 11 seconds. Dale Hutchinson walked around the table. He extended his hand to me. "Mr. Caldwell," he said. "I'm sorry we didn't meet under better circumstances. Your company has an excellent reputation. If circumstances change and you're ever interested in selling, please contact us directly." I shook his hand. Catherine Morrison followed. She shook my hand as well, her grip firm and professional. "The trust documents were very thorough," she said quietly. "Your attorney did good work." "She usually does," I said. Neither of them shook Brent's hand. They walked out. The financial advisor followed. The door closed with a soft click. The conference room was silent. Only 4 of us remained, me, Brent, Celeste, and Clarence, standing by the door. Brent stared at the unsigned MOU on the table in front of him, at the documents he'd been so confident about an hour ago, at the deal that had just died. Then he looked at me. "You knew," he said. I reached into the leather folder Clarence had carried in, pulled out a manila envelope, slid it across the table. "Open it," I said. Brent's hands shook as he picked up the envelope. He opened it, pulled out the contents. 9 folders, each one labeled financial transfers, medical records, operating agreement, video footage, HIPAA violation, break-in evidence, bank statements, capacity evaluation, affidavit, and on top a business card. Detective Sarah Mitchell, Watauga County Sheriff's Office. Brent looked up at me. "What is this?" he whispered. Everything," I said. "Everything you did, documented, time-stamped, witnessed, ready for the district attorney." I stood up. "The deal's dead, Brent, and now we need to talk about why." Brent stared at the folders like they were vipers coiled on the table. 9 of them. Tan manila, each labeled with a different month, spanning 14 months of evidence. His hand moved toward the top one, then pulled back. "You can't," he said. His voice had gone hollow. "Dad, you can't do this." I didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched my son, this stranger wearing my son's face, struggle with the reality that his careful scheme had collapsed. "I'm still your son." He looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion. "Doesn't that matter? You barred me from my grandson's wedding," I said quietly. "You told everyone I was dying. You broke into my house. You accessed my medical records illegally. You tried to steal my company. You were going to lock me in Sunrise Care and drain Margaret's trust fund, while Zane watched his inheritance disappear." Brent's jaw clenched. "I built that company, on the foundation I laid for 38 years. While you sat in that house remembering Mom." The words came out sharp, bitter. "I ran operations. I negotiated contracts. I grew revenue 47% in 5 years while you, while I trusted you," I said. "While I believed my son when he said the land sale was strategic. While I believed my daughter-in-law when she showed me edited security footage. While I believed you were protecting the business, not planning to sell it piece by piece to a Texas conglomerate." The conference room felt smaller suddenly. Brent stood paced to the window, then wheeled back. "The detective's card," he said, focusing on it like it was the only thing in the room. "What does that mean?" "It means Detective Sarah Mitchell received copies of everything in those folders on Monday." I kept my voice level, factual. "The fraudulent operating agreement with Section 8.4 removed. The $820,000 wire transfer to the Delaware acquisition account. The HIPAA violation documentation from October 22nd. The photographs from your 2:17 a.m. break-in. The duplicate invoices Zane found showing trust fund transfers." Brent's face went white. "Zane is protected," I said immediately. "He had no knowledge of the fraud. He found one piece of evidence and brought it to me because he thought it was a mistake. He has a signed affidavit from Judith Whitfield confirming he took no part in any aspect of this situation and reported potential irregularities immediately upon discovery." The relief that flickered across Brent's face, relief that his son was safe, would have moved me 6 months ago. Now it just looked like calculation, assessing damage, protecting assets. You went to the DA, Brent said slowly. Detective Mitchell went to the DA. I'm just a concerned citizen who discovered evidence of fraud targeting my estate and brought it to law enforcement's attention. Brent sank back into his chair, picked up the top folder, opened it. Inside were copies of the annotated operating agreement draft I'd photographed in his office, the one with Section 8.4 crossed out, and his handwritten note, remove. Vernon retired, not active member. When? His voice had gone flat. And when did I know, or when did I decide you'd left me no choice? Either. Both. He closed the folder without looking at the other pages. The photographer told me about your health lies at the wedding. Marcus Henley, the one you hired. He asked how I was feeling. I paused. Everything before that was plausible deniability. After that, it was deliberate investigation. 2 months, Brent said. You've been what? Playing senile while you built a case. I've been protecting what your mother and I built. What we planned to pass to Zane. What you tried to steal. Brent's hands pressed flat on the table. What happens now? That's not my decision anymore. Detective Mitchell presented evidence to the district attorney on December 12th. Whatever charges they file are their determination. But you could. He stopped, started again. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding, family business complications. I could lie to prosecutors to protect you. I collected my coat from the chair back. The way you lied to me about Mom's trust. The way you lied to Zane about strategic acquisitions. The way you lied to everyone about my health. Brent said nothing. I hope you have a good attorney, I said. You're going to need one. I was at the door when he spoke again. And she'd be ashamed of you. I turned back. Margaret, destroying her son over money. This was never about money, I said quietly. This was about you trying to erase me while I was still breathing. About you stealing from your own son's inheritance. About you being willing to lock your father in a care facility to hide what you'd done. I opened the door. Margaret would be proud I protected Zane, I said. And heartbroken that I had to protect him from you. Judith called the next morning at 7:43 a.m. The DA filed charges, she said without preamble. 3 felonies. Elder financial exploitation, wire fraud, and HIPAA violation conspiracy. I sat at the kitchen table where Margaret and I had shared coffee for 41 years. Outside, the December morning was gray and cold, and Zane, officially cleared. The DA confirmed his affidavit removes him from any investigation. She paused. Vernon, you should know Brent retained Mitchell and Strauss, the biggest defense firm in Asheville. The kind that charged $800 an hour and made prosecutors work for every conviction. Of course he did, I said, but my coffee tasted bitter anyway, and I couldn't tell if it was the brew or everything else. 2 days after his father's arrest, my grandson learned the truth from 37 seconds of hotel security footage. Clarence sent it directly, no warning, just a secure link and a timestamp. October 21st, 2023, 12:14 p.m., the day of the wedding. I didn't know Zane had received it until my phone rang at 8:47 p.m. on December 17th. I was at the kitchen table, the same spot where Judith's call had found me 2 mornings earlier. Same bitter coffee grown cold. The screen showed Zane's name. First time he'd called me in 14 months. Grandpa, one word. His voice cracked on it. Zane. Silence stretched between us. I heard movement in the background, Paloma's voice, soft and concerned. Then Zane again. He came, my grandson said. He was there. He came for my wedding and nobody told me. I closed my eyes. Clarence had warned me he was sending the footage, that Zane deserved to see it before depositions started. I'd agreed. But knowing it was coming and hearing my grandson's voice break were different things. I watched it 3 times, Zane continued. You're in the frame for 37 seconds, wearing a navy vest. You reached the ballroom entrance at exactly 12:14 right when the ceremony started. You timed it so you wouldn't interrupt, didn't you? Yes. And Dad. He stopped. Started again. Brent turns you away. I can't hear what he says, but I can see your face. You don't argue. You just leave. The footage had been part of the evidence package. Hotel security cameras captured my arrival, Brent's interception, the entire encounter that ended with me walking toward the elevators, while my grandson married Paloma 200 feet away, unaware I'd been there at all. I came for you, I said quietly. Not for him. For you. I know. Zane's breath hitched. Grandpa, I don't. I kept my voice gentle but firm. You didn't know. Your father made certain of that. Ficta, Paloma's crying, Zane said after a moment. She wanted you there. She asked me 3 times if I was sure you were too sick to travel. I told her what Dad said, that you couldn't even remember my name half the time. I thought about the cognitive evaluation, the perfect 30 over 30 scores, the neurologist's report confirming what I'd always known my mind was fine. Hi, the footage shows something else, Zane said. The timestamp. 12:14 p.m. You calculated exactly when to arrive. Late enough that the ceremony had started early enough that if they'd let you in, you could have stood in the back without disrupting anything. I didn't want to cause a scene, I said. You never do. Zane's voice steadied. That's why it worked, isn't it, Dad's whole plan? Because you're the kind of man who walks away when someone closes a door instead of forcing it open. Sometimes walking away is the stronger choice. And sometimes, Zane said, it just lets the wrong people win. We talked for 43 minutes. About the wedding, about the evidence about Margaret, and how she'd loved watching Zane grow up. About trust and betrayal and the difference between family and blood. When we finally hung up, my coffee was ice cold, and the kitchen felt less empty than it had in months. You ever watch someone you love discover they were lied to? The exact second they understand changes their face. I hadn't seen Zane's face during that call, but I'd heard it in his voice the moment belief shattered and reality took its place. That sound stays with you. 3 days later, I sat across from Judith in her office while she outlined what the DA's investigation meant. Formal charges were filed December 16th. She said, spreading documents across her desk. The grand jury convened yesterday. They've indicted both Brent and Celeste. On what grounds? Elder financial exploitation primary charge. The $820,000 acquisition deposit plus the $94,000 wedding payment equals $914,000 in documented transfers made under fraudulent pretenses. She paused. Class E felony. Mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines apply if convicted. The numbers were familiar. I'd reviewed those wire transfer records with Clarence a dozen times, but hearing them translated into legal charges made them heavier. HIPAA violations for the medical record access, Judith continued. Evidence fabrication for the edited security footage Celeste showed you. Wire fraud for the interstate nature of the acquisition deposit. And the process? Months, possibly a year before trial. Brent's attorneys will file motions, suppress evidence, dismiss charges, delay proceedings. Standard defense strategy when the evidence is strong. She looked up. The court has barred both defendants from leaving North Carolina. They surrendered passports yesterday. I thought about Brent, sitting in his house, unable to run, unable to hide, waiting for the legal system to grind through his case, with the same inexorable patience I'd used to build mine. Like this will take months, possibly a year before trial. Judith said. I need you to be prepared for that timeline. I have time. Vernon. She leaned forward. What do you want from this not legally personally? Elder financial exploitation, $914,000 documented. Class E felony mandatory minimum. The words sat on the page between us like a verdict already rendered. Haki. I don't want to destroy them, I said carefully. I want them responsible for what they did. I want the record to show what happened. I want Zane to inherit what Margaret and I built, protected from anyone who'd take it from him. That's what the law's for, Judith said. Then I trust the law. She made notes, asked questions about my availability for depositions, explained witness preparation procedures. The conversation moved through procedural details, discovery timelines, motion hearings, plea bargain possibilities that I said I'd consider if the DA recommended them. The process is slow, Judith said finally, but thorough. That's what you need. I have time, I said again, and I did. Zane called every night now. My grandson had become the family connection I'd lost when they barred me from his wedding. In the strange arithmetic of family destruction, I'd gained back something I thought was gone forever. My phone buzzed on Judith's desk. We both looked down. Caller E.D. Celeste Caldwell. I hadn't spoken to my daughter-in-law since the conference room confrontation. Hadn't heard her voice since before the evidence folders, before the detective's card, before everything collapsed. Judith watched me, silent question in her expression. I picked up the phone and answered. Celeste wanted me to know she hadn't known about the forged operating agreement. Her voice shook when she said it. I thanked her for calling and hung up. Judith didn't ask what my daughter-in-law had said. Some conversations don't need witnesses. 4 days later, Christmas Eve arrived. The first Christmas after you turn in your son for fraud feels different, not empty, just honest. I woke at 5:47 a.m. in the house Margaret and I had bought in 1982. The same creaking floorboards, the same view of Pine Haven's main street through frost-edged windows, the same coffee maker that took exactly 4 minutes to brew. But the silence felt clean somehow. No waiting for phone calls that would carry lies. No wondering what my son was planning in the spaces between his words. Christmas alone wasn't lonely. It was the first honest holiday in years without Brent's manipulation lurking beneath every conversation, every gift, every carefully staged family gathering designed to maintain the illusion of normalcy while he dismantled everything behind the scenes. I made coffee, read the paper, watched Pine Haven wake up through windows that needed washing. At 2:18 p.m., Clarence knocked. He stood on the porch holding a cake tin, his breath fogging in the December cold. 71 years old retired detective, the man who'd photographed Brent's break-in and helped me build 9 folders of evidence that had ended with felony charges. A wife-made fruitcake, he said. Figured you shouldn't eat alone on Christmas. I took the tin. It was still warm. Come in. We sat in the living room, where Margaret used to arrange poinsettias every December. I'd bought one this year, a small one, red and green, against the window. Clarence didn't comment on it. Didn't comment on the lack of other decorations, the absence of presents under a tree I hadn't bothered to put up. I poured coffee, cut the fruitcake. We ate in the comfortable quiet of 2 old men who'd seen enough of life to know that silence could be its own kind of conversation. Zane's coming next week, it's his, I said finally. Clarence nodded. Good. January 1st. Dinner here. First time since... I stopped. Started again. First time we'll really talk. He called you every night after he saw the footage. He did. I looked at the mantel where Margaret's photograph sat beside a small wooden box. I'm going to give him her watch. Margaret would like that. The watch box sat on the table like a bridge between generations, Margaret's wrist to Zane's. She'd worn it every day for 23 years, a silver Belova with a mother-of-pearl face that caught light like water. When she died, I'd put it away because seeing it hurt. Now it felt right to pass it on. Clarence studied the box, but didn't touch it. That's good, Vernon. Real good. We sat until the candle I'd lit that morning burned halfway down, until the winter light through the windows turned golden and thin. Clarence left at 4:30 with the empty cake tin and a handshake that said everything his words hadn't. I spent Christmas evening alone with Margaret's photograph and the knowledge that I'd protected what we'd built together. Not empty, just honest. 7 days later, I returned to the office. New Year's Eve morning, 7 a.m. First official visit to Caldwell Transportation since the wedding. I'd driven past it a dozen times in the months between, but I hadn't gone inside. Hadn't wanted to see what Brent's absence had done to the company Margaret and I had started in a rented garage with 3 trucks and a dream. The parking lot held 22 vehicles. The office lights were on. Robert Hayes met me at the door. 54 operations manager, 15-year company veteran with gray hair and steady hands, who'd kept every truck running and every route covered while the CEO sat under felony investigation. We'd hired him in 2008 when the economy collapsed and other companies were laying off. He'd never forgotten it. He extended his hand. I shook it. No extra words needed. The office smelled like coffee and diesel fuel, and the particular mixture of paperwork and industry that meant a transportation company was alive and working. Robert handed me a folder. December report, he said. I opened it. Read the numbers I'd built a life understanding. Revenue $2.3 million. Right on schedule. 52 trucks running routes from Pine Haven to Charlotte to Asheville to Knoxville, carrying freight that paid mortgages and college tuitions and kept the regional economy moving. All of it now held in an irrevocable trust with Zane as beneficiary, protected from anyone who'd try to steal it. You kept it running, I said. Robert shrugged. Just doing the job you hired me for. But it was more than that. The company had survived because the foundation was stronger than one man's fraud. Because the people who drove the trucks and managed the routes and handled the logistics believed in the work itself, not just whoever signed the paychecks. I walked through the facility. Saw trucks being serviced, drivers checking manifests, dispatchers coordinating routes with the calm efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. Nothing had changed, except the CEO was under investigation and barred from entering the building. 52 trucks, 38 years. One CEO under felony investigation. Company runs anyway. I stood in the garage and understood something I'd missed while building evidence folders and protecting assets, defending the company from Brent. Wasn't the same as succession planning. I'd secured the inheritance, but Zane needed more than legal protection. He needed mentorship. He needed to learn what Margaret and I had built, why it mattered, how to lead people who'd trusted us for decades. Protecting wasn't the same as preparing. I locked the office door at 4:47 p.m. and drove home through Pine Haven at dusk. The streetlights came on as I passed, illuminating the town where I'd lived my entire adult life. Where I'd built a business and raised a son and lost a wife and discovered that trust could be weaponized by the people you loved most. Tomorrow was January 1st, 2024. The day Zane arrived for dinner. The first family gathering since the wedding. I set 2 places at the table, one for me, one for my grandson, and wondered what Margaret would think of everything that had happened. The fraud, the evidence, the charges, the broken family. I thought she'd be proud I'd protected Zane, and heartbroken it had been necessary. The plates sat opposite each other waiting. Tomorrow we'd finally talk. The plates sat opposite each other waiting. I looked at them for a long moment before turning away from the table. Destroying your son's life doesn't feel like victory. It feels like amputation, necessary but permanent. I sat in the living room, where Clarence and I had shared fruitcake on Christmas Eve. The poinsettia in the window had started dropping leaves. Outside Pine Haven's New Year's Eve was quiet. Most people were at parties or family gatherings, celebrating the turn of the calendar with people they trusted. I thought about what Brent and Celeste were facing. Brent had been suspended as CEO during the investigation. Not fired, suspended. The board had voted unanimously after the DA filed charges. His company accounts were frozen pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. His attorneys at Mitchell and Strauss were negotiating with prosecutors, trying to reduce the charges, delay the trial, find some angle that would soften what was coming. They wouldn't find it. The evidence was too thorough. 9 folders of documentation that tracked 14 months of systematic fraud, all of it time-stamped, photographed, verified by third parties. Celeste faced her own charge. HIPAA violation for accessing medical records she had no legal right to touch. Criminal, not civil. The hospital's compliance officer had testified that she'd logged into the system using credentials that should have been revoked when she left her nursing position 3 years earlier. She'd accessed my records on October 22nd, the same day Brent had called me asking about my health. Coordinated, deliberate, documented. The DA had offered them separate plea agreements. Celeste's attorney was reportedly considering cooperation, testifying against Brent in exchange for reduced charges. Family loyalty measured against prison time. I wondered which would win. I didn't feel triumph thinking about it. Didn't feel satisfaction or vindication or any of the emotions you're supposed to feel when justice catches up with people who've wronged you. Just the dull ache of necessity. This was what protecting Zane's inheritance had required. This was what happened when you chose accountability over family silence. Zane himself was legally untouched. The DA had confirmed it in writing. My grandson had no criminal exposure, no civil liability, nothing that would follow him beyond the fact that his father was under felony indictment. But Zane had made his own choice that mattered more than legal protection. He'd told Paloma everything. The fraud, the wedding exclusion, the surveillance footage, the evidence folders, all of it. He'd sat his wife down the day after he'd called me and explained that his father had stolen from his grandfather, that his grandfather had turned his father in to authorities, that the family he'd married into was collapsing under the weight of crimes committed in the name of inheritance. Paloma had apparently listened without interrupting. Then she'd asked Zane one question. "What do you want to do?" And Zane had said, "Call my grandfather every night until he knows I'm not part of what my father did." Zane chose honesty with his wife about our family's fraud, learned integrity I'd tried to model, but never explicitly taught. Somewhere in watching Margaret and me for 23 years before she died, somewhere in the gap between my words and my actions, my grandson had absorbed the lesson that truth mattered more than comfort. Grandchildren learn more from watching you than from anything you say. Zane did. He'd learned it so thoroughly that even when his father was systematically lying to everyone, even when choosing honesty meant admitting his family was broken, he'd still pick truth. I'd never taught him that in words. But Margaret and I had lived it, and apparently he'd been paying attention. I stood and walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer beside the sink where I kept things that mattered but didn't have another home. Beneath old warranty cards and instruction manuals and the spare key to Margaret's garden shed, I found the envelope. I'd written the letter on November 18th. 2 weeks after the wedding, 1 week before Zane had found the duplicate invoices that would become evidence. Back when my grandson still believed I was too sick to attend his wedding, back when Brent's isolation campaign had worked perfectly. I'd written it at this same table by hand on Margaret's stationery that still carried the faint scent of her perfume. Written it knowing I might never send it. Written it because I needed to say the things that mattered, even if no one ever read them. I unfolded the pages. My handwriting, 70 years of practice, hadn't made it prettier, just more consistent. The letter talked about the watch I was planning to give him, about Margaret wearing it every day, about time being the only gift that mattered, because you could never get it back once you'd given it away. I read the closing paragraph aloud to the empty kitchen. Legacy isn't assets, Zane. It's how you treat people when you have power over them. It's choosing honesty when lies would be easier. It's protecting those who trust you even when protection costs you everything. Margaret's handwriting was still visible on the watch case inscription, faint but readable after 23 years of wear. Time given is love measured. She'd had it engraved the day I gave it to her, our 20th anniversary. Said if she was going to wear my gift every day, it needed to remind her what mattered. Time. Presence. The quiet accumulation of days spent together. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope. Tomorrow, Zane was coming to dinner. Tomorrow, we'd sit at this table and talk, really talk, for the first time since the wedding. Tomorrow, I'd give him the watch and explain what his grandmother had meant about love and time and the choices that defined a life. I wouldn't send the letter, wouldn't need to. The words I needed to say could be said face to face the way important conversations should happen. Not written, not mediated by paper and distance, but spoken across a table between two people who'd chosen to trust each other again. But I placed the letter beside the watch box anyway, just in case words failed me, just in case I needed the safety of having written down what mattered most. The kitchen table held both items, now the unsent letter and the watch that had measured Margaret's days. In less than 24 hours, Zane would sit across from me at this same table for the first honest conversation we'd had since everything collapsed. I turned off the light, leaving both items waiting in the darkness. Tomorrow the story would continue, but some endings I was learning were just beginnings, wearing different clothes. The letter and watch box stayed on the kitchen table through the night, still there when January sun crossed the window the next morning. My grandson knocked on my door at 9 o'clock on New Year's Day. For the first time in 15 months, he came alone, no father arranging the visit, no mother coordinating schedules. Just Zane standing on the porch in a canvas jacket, hands in his pockets, looking more like the boy who'd helped me change truck oil at 16 than the man who'd gotten married without me there. "Grandpa," he said, "come in." I'd been awake since 6. The coffee was already made, the house cleaned in that particular way you clean when someone important is coming, not spotless, just honest. Margaret's poinsettia was still dropping leaves by the window. Some things you leave as they are. We sat in the living room. I poured coffee too strong, the way Margaret always complained about, but drank anyway. Zane wrapped both hands around the mug like he needed something to hold on to. We talked slowly and carefully, two people learning how to have a real conversation again. About the company, 52 trucks, still running routes, still covered Robert Hayes, keeping everything steady for 15 years. About Paloma. About the house Zane was looking at in Hendersonville. About everything except the evidence folders, the criminal charges, and the father who had tried to steal from us both. At 11:30, I stood and retrieved the watch box from the kitchen table. "Zane," I said, "I have something that was meant for you." Inside the wooden box, the silver Bulova caught the January light, its mother-of-pearl face gleaming the way it had on Margaret's wrist for 23 years. The inscription on the case read clearly, "Time given is love measured." "Your grandmother wore this every day," I said. "She wanted me to give it to you on your wedding day. I wasn't there that day, but I'm here now." His hands trembled slightly as he took the watch. He turned it over, read the inscription, and his eyes went bright. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I should have—" "Don't be sorry," I said quietly. "Just be the kind of man this watch deserves." He left at 1 o'clock, holding the box, carefully promising to visit again next week. I watched his truck disappear around the corner, then sat alone in the chair where Margaret and I had spent 41 years together before cancer took her. I thought about what 38 years in business had taught me. Trust without verification isn't wisdom, it's wishful thinking. Brent had tried to sell everything for immediate cash and lost it all instead, his position, his family's trust, any legitimate path forward. If he'd been patient, if he'd been honest, he would have inherited everything naturally. But greed couldn't wait, and Zane still believed the work itself mattered. I'd seen it in how he spoke about the business, about understanding it rather than simply inheriting it. The watch was in the right hands. The company was protected. My grandson understood that legacy meant more than assets. Outside, January sun set over Pinehaven, painting the street amber in shadow. 68 years old, widowed, son under felony investigation, grandson reconciled, company secure. That's enough. And to you listening to my story, remember, this family loyalty doesn't mean accepting betrayal in silence. Looking back, I wish I'd set firmer boundaries years earlier. I mistook trust for blind faith and assumed that because he was my son, he deserved authority without accountability. Don't make my mistake. Love your family, but verify their integrity. The hardest lesson I learned at 68 was that protecting someone from consequences isn't love. It's enabling destruction. This isn't just one of those dad's revenge stories where the wronged father gets even. Real family justice isn't about punishment. It's about accountability and protection. I learned that loving people enough means letting them face the consequences of their choices. God's timing brought my grandson back to me when I thought I'd lost him forever, and that reconciliation taught me more about grace than any courtroom victory could. True justice preserves what matters most: integrity, truth, and the next generation's inheritance, both financial and moral. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a situation where family justice required difficult choices? Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and please subscribe to Wise Revenge for more dad's revenge stories about standing up for what's right. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. As a reminder, certain details in this story have been fictionalized for privacy and storytelling purposes, but the lessons about trust, boundaries, and accountability remain real and applicable.